Right. Can everyone hear me? Good, nice. Good morning. How are you guys doing? Good show so far? Good, good. All right, so they told me, they said, hey, if you have standing room only when your session starts, you can give away a Surface. So we're not quite there, so instead they gave me 2 beach balls, which, you know, are almost as cool as a Surface. So I'm gonna, to wake us all up, I'm going to hit this beach ball out in the audience, and I want you to pretend that it's a piece of data bouncing around all over the world. And we got to protect it, so don't let it hit the ground. All right, there we go. My name is Aaron Hartwell. I'm a product management leader in Microsoft. Oh my gosh. Wow. Hey, Maitali, are we working on any features that will help with that? I'm one of the product management leaders at Microsoft working in the compliance space. I'm going to spend a little bit of time today doing some framing, and then I'm going to hand it over to Maitali here. She's the headliner act for this show, my partner in crime for this session. And she's going to walk you through some of the work that we're doing to help you really understand your data. So I'll start with some framing here. I think we probably all realize this, but we live in a digital world that has completely transformed our lives unlike ever before. From the way that we interact with each other, to the way that we perceive the world, and to the way we run our business, it's all radically different than it was before. When you look at the data part of that, there are a few things that are worth noting. First, the volume of data that's being generated has greatly increased. Second thing is, the number of locations where data is stored has multiplied. Much like the beach ball, data is all over the place. Third thing, kind of related to the second, but the sheer number of devices that get used to consume the data, to edit the data, collaborate on the data, are more varied than ever before. So the result of all this is it's becoming increasingly difficult to stay on top of all this data and manage it in a way that respects the sensitivity and the risk associated with it. Regulatory agencies, governments are stepping in to try to help and creating lots of rules for us all to follow. But these rules, as all of you can attest, aren't static. They're constantly changing. We did some research and we found that there are 220 regulatory updates per day coming from 1,000 different agencies. Just think about that number. It's hard to fathom. It's hard to stay on top of it all. And so customers ask us all the time, how do we keep up with all this? We struggle with it too at Microsoft. To combat this, a lot of companies try to hire compliance experts. But as many of you can attest, there's a talent gap there. It's hard to find compliance experts. People are important, part of the equation, but we think technology plays a big role in filling that talent gap. When we look at the industry and all the solutions that are out there available to customers, there's a lot of really good point solutions that do 1 or 2 things really well, but that causes us to collect all these solutions together and try to create some sort of a cohesive suite. But when you step back and look at the suite, it looks a little bit like a ransom note. You guys know what I mean? Like crooked letters and glued on paper. It doesn't all kind of fit together. So all the things that I've just said paint kind of a dire picture. But the truth is, we think there's a huge opportunity for us to come in and help customers in this journey. So what we want to do today is kind of talk about some of the work. Our compliance strategy has 4 pillars. One of the pillars is called information protection and governance. And the first step to protecting and governing your data is really understanding it. And when we say understanding it, we're talking about things like how much data do you have? Where is it? Where is it stored? Somebody said in a session yesterday, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your data is? I thought that was pretty funny. Third thing is, who's touching it? What are they doing with it? And so we're going to talk a little bit about today about some of the capabilities we have to help you gain a deep understanding of the data in your enterprise. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Maitali, and she's going to start walking through some of the product work we've been doing. switch you over. There you go.
I need to get back to the slide.
Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
To my slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. So today, I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of a class. We're going to go and learn about what are the capabilities that we have for data classification. And when we started thinking about this problem, it was a couple of years back, but really what has helped us is bringing your insights into helping the top-of-mind questions that you have. So let's start with the top-of-mind questions. First, data is distributed. We all know that. It's really hard to find where our data is, where our crown jewels are, where's my sensitive data. So that's one thing that we keep hearing. Second, as Aaron mentioned, regulatory updates keep coming in. You need to understand that regulation, you understand the data protection standards, and then identify all that data sets and handle the data protection needs. Third, as a security admin and a compliance admin, your top-of-mind thing is, are people in your organization handling that sensitive data correctly? When they are dealing with sensitive data, internally and externally, where is that located, and how are they using it? And that's sort of been the foundation. These questions have been the foundation of what we are here to show you today. But not only that, when we started thinking about this problem, we had to think about the onboarding, which we're going to talk about, but the scale and the volume and complexity. So when you look at the volume of data, new data is getting born every day. There's data at rest. You're bringing your data to the cloud, so you're creating new data sets. And then in terms of complexity, we know that today you have your own specific tenant data, such as your patents, your intellectual property, such as financial documents, legal documents, your company's specifications. You want to start to identify those kind of data sets as well and classify them. And classify them at scale means when it's being born and when it's at rest, both. So that's what we're going to show you today, is how you're going to start to tackle some of the problems. So we're going to go through a demo. And the first part of the demo is going to be an onboarding to data protection and governance with confidence. OK. So I'm going to switch. OK. All right. So what you see here today is the data classification capabilities. This is the new compliance center, and you see them here. What you're looking at is what we call as the overview dashboard. Think of this as the single pane of glass. This single pane of glass is starting to bring you insights across your distributed digital estate, which means your millions of SharePoint sites and documents that you have stored, your email, could be on-prem data. Over time, we'll start to bring more and more insights that you need to start to understand. So the first thing that I want to let's pay attention to is what we found here, which is sensitive info types most used that we found in your content. And this is Contoso Electronics. It's a company that I'm going to use for across my demo. Let's break it down. Are you all intrigued how we have found this data? What's going on behind the scenes? So I'm going to click on the sensitive info types. Sensitive info types, as you're aware, is an out-of-the-box sensitive info types that we have as part of what we built in Microsoft. These sensitive types use pattern matching to find the data within your data sets. Not only that, you've probably started to create your own sensitive info types, which are using KQL or keywords, your lexicons. What we're doing here is we're taking that out-of-the-box types and doing a scan across your digital estate. And then when we come back to overview, we're showing you what are the matches within Contoso's organization that we've found. And one of the pain points that we really wanted to solve was, actually, when I click into this, now what you're seeing here is the Content Explorer. The value of the Content Explorer is that it provides that unified view across your digital data for the sensitive type matches that we found. And what you start to see here is not only the matches against my data sets, but including my sensitive info types that I've created. For the purposes of this demo, I'd really want to start to look at the EU data, because GDPR top of mind. I want to start to look at some of the data sets around EU and where these have been created, located. So let's start to look at that. OK. So I'm going to click on EU debit card number. And what you see here is I can drill into exactly the location and find the data sets that match the credit card number. But we all know that data matches against many information, could match against more information types. So what you can look is not only that it's matched against the credit card number, but it starts to show you all the matching data sets. That's pretty cool. OK, so let's close out of this, and let's look at another capability. All right, I'm going to come back. All right, so what you see here is what we've also built is a native integrated viewer. Now, of course, you can set this up in a way that the right permissions are there, the right RBAC, so that if you don't want to give the permissions to the data unit owner, then you can do so. And that's really powerful, because now what you start to see is the content matching the type correctly? Not only that, we've brought to you some more powerful insights into the data, such as the person who's created it, the last modified time. So now you might be wondering, how can I use this data? So think about the problem, which is when we want to start creating a data classification scheme, we want to start to work across many business unit owners who are creating these data sets. Could be my legal department, my HR department. Not only that, I want to bring that into my purview so that I can work through and start to really look at what kind of labels and policies I should start creating. OK, so having looked at that, let's tackle the next problem. Our next problem is, we've spoken about, is around sharing of sensitive data and risky activities within your org. And this is top of mind for all security compliance admins, because you want to know if your users are really dealing with the sensitive data correctly. So what you see here is the Activity Explorer. This is an extremely flexible tool. I call it, it's like Mr. Incredible, very flexible. And what it does is it gives you a holistic view about the file activities and their movement, internal and external to your org. And that's pretty cool. But not only that, the way we've looked at your inputs as we've spoken to customers, you really want to start to create your custom queries to get insights into it. So I'm going to create a custom query because I want to know, are documents getting sent from Contoso which are not applying the sensitivity label that I had published? So I had published a manual sensitivity label, and I wanted my end users to label sensitive data when they send it out. So what I can start to do is I can start to use these filters. Filters allow me to take a look at, like, say, date range, activity, what kind of activities that I want to look at, locations. And one of the most cool features that I like is what we call as the filters, which are 30-plus filters that we've provided that you can slice and dice the data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the file path, because I want to know a couple of departments that I had published the label on, whether they are labeling their data. I also want to start to customize my columns, because I want to see whether the sensitivity label that I had published is getting applied on the data or not. So I'm going to click on the sensitivity label, and I'm going to apply it as a column in the Activity Explorer. Now I want to do some more drill down. So I'm going to select the activity, and I'm going to see whether any of this data at egress is getting shared out. So I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm going to filter the data more. And now I really start to see there are some documents that are getting sent out which don't have the sensitivity label. Not only that, I can now get more insights into who the user is, where it's located, and where it was sent from, when this happened. So now this data really starts to help me, because what are some of the outcomes I want to drive? A, I want to educate my end users. I want to maybe use the powerful information protection capabilities of auto-labeling so that when they are creating this sensitive data, in context of creating them, we can assist them to label them. So that's one. I can start to be more hardcore and go and quarantine or block this kind of sensitive data. So I can really start to come up with a strategy around how to deal with it. So far, with me? Awesome. Sounds incredible? Good. But we are not stopping here today. So we're going to the next section of our demo, which is for trainable classifiers. So we spoke about the onboarding. I'm starting to understand the labels and policies I need to create. But now, let's bring back to the point that Aaron was mentioning, volume and complexity. There's no doubt that we all have data in our organizations which cannot be found just with pattern matching, right? Because I take a resume, for example. I had put the label, manual doc label. I'd find me keywords. These resumes weren't found, and end users forget to label them. We all know this challenge. So how do we go and classify this kind of data, which is hard, it's not predisposed to be found just by manual labeling or pattern matching? This is where we are introducing trainable classifiers. What are trainable classifiers? They are extremely powerful and built using AI and automation, and they tune to your specific org to find the kinds of data that are specific to you. For example, let's take that I want to create, I know that my legal department is creating a lot of contracts nowadays. And contracts are hard to classify for me just by looking at pattern matching, so I can create contracts using this trainable classifier method. What we've also done to help you onboard is to bring to you ready-to-use classifiers that Microsoft has trained. So we have 6 ready-to-use classifiers. Start with offensive language, resume, source code, targeted harassment, profanity, and threat. Our strategy is we built on the right compliance solution, like you'll see with some of our sessions later today within risk management. We can start to integrate these out-of-the-box classifiers. But the cool thing about these out-of-the-box classifiers and the ones that you build is now that they can start to get applied as a condition, as an action right within and applied with your sensitivity and retention label. So let's start with a demo. It's 3 steps. I'm going to show you 3 steps of how you build your own tenant-specific classifier. So first, I'm going to start by creating a classifier, and I'm going to name it. All right. And what I've done is, what the first step is seeding. So you need to seed the classifier with positive samples. Think of this as, this is the kind of data that you want to find across your organization, and then you're going to scale and find it. And so what I've done is I've curated a set of archive contracts that my legal department has built. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this URL and enter the SharePoint seed site. All right. Okay, there was a mistake there. Some problem in copying it. Okay. Oh. Right, let's try again. Okay, so I'll keep moving on, but you get the idea. When you enter the seed site now, what it's going to do is your classifier is going to start the first step of seeding. When you enter that site, now you come to okay, you got that? Okay. Thanks, Kathy. All right, there you go. You start to seed it, and then you can start to review and finish the phase. Once we've processed the initial seed documents, your prediction is built using a statistical model. So the next step for you is to start testing it. During the test phase, what you need is both positive and negative samples. So now you can start to know where all do you want to find all of these contracts. So what you can do is, I've come to this stage where I'm ready to test the classifier, and I can now add items. Add items to test means you can insert the SharePoint locations across your tenant, which have both positive and negative samples. Once you do that, the user can then, once the model is complete, and it is starting to predict basically documents that are relevant or not relevant based on the category that is finding. So in my case, it's the EU contracts category. And now what I want to do is I want to become the human teacher. So as a human teacher, you're going to start saying what the classifier has found, our training has found, is it relevant, not relevant. Once that is done, then the model starts to stabilize, and it starts to guide you to say, is it ready to get published? So let's walk through the review process. So what you see here is that the items have been tested, and now I can start to review them. What you start to see here is the familiar review tool that we've integrated across many of our solutions. And now I can start to really see the document that was predicted as relevant or not. And then I can say whether this was yes or no. I can agree with it. And that's how I start to train it. If you are a little bit of a geek and you want to understand more in depth about what's happening, you can also test and use the analyze feature. What the analyze feature does is it gives you all of the items that you had used for your test, and which ones were predicted as positive and which ones were predicted as negative. So you can really start to understand the mechanics of how this is working. So once the model has been stabilized, I can start to go back to my data classification. And once I've published the classifier, now it becomes ready to use. That means the 6 out-of-the-box ones that Microsoft had created, and now you as Contoso org have created your classifiers. They start to appear in this ready-to-use list. Great. OK. So now let's tackle the problem of how do we start using these powerful trainable classifiers within our information protection and governance solutions. The first thing that I want to do is with contracts. With contracts, I know that I want to retain them for a specific amount of time based on my policy. Because GDPR or other regulations, I need to specify that for a certain amount of time. So what I can start to do is I can go to information governance. Now, if you start to see, this is our new compliance center. All the solutions are oriented at the bottom. So I'm in the information governance solution. And here, what I've done is I've created a label already. And I'm going to show you what I've done. So this is my EU contracts label. And now I want to auto-apply it so that I want to my EU contracts classifier is ready. I want to publish it to all the departments that are creating these contracts to the users. And I want to do it in an auto-classified way. I can go here. And in addition, now what you're seeing here is in addition to sensitive info and specific keywords and properties, you start to see you can apply label to content that matches a trainable classifier, out of the box or the ones that you've created. So I'm going to select this condition, and I'm going to go here. All right. There you go. So now you start to see how simply we've integrated this natively within the retention labels. And you can start to use it as a condition. Like I say, I can use the contours or contracts. I'm going to cancel out of it. All right. Having done that, you want to start to see, is your data getting classified correctly? So you are in your monitoring phase now. So where do we go back? Question to the class. We go back to our Content Explorer. The Content Explorer should now start to show you this newly created label and all the documents that it's classified. So I'm going to go back to the Content Explorer. I'm going to go right down to my retention labels. These are all the retention labels that I published. I'm going to select the EU contracts label. I'm going to go to the SharePoint sites where it's found the data across my estate. And I can start to see now all the contracts that have been labeled with this. And of course, as always, you can go and select on a specific document. You can see whether it's correctly classified. You can see who had created it and all of that goodness. So that brings us, coming close, we're getting there, starting to automate. I also want to remember the problem that we had where all of these resumes that we had published this manual label and users were not starting to label correctly. So I can now start to do some powerful capabilities with information protection. One of the key announcements, actually it's my next session we're about to make, is that we are introducing auto-labeling within native clients, which means that you can show helpful recommended tips with sensitivity labels to end users when they are creating this. And this is natively built in within the web apps and the rich client apps. What's powerful is that not only can you classify and recommend users based on their pattern matching methods, now you can attach that trainable classifier to the sensitivity label so that when the end user is actually creating a resume, you can assist them and guide them to remind them to apply the label. Or if you are pretty confident of the resume working great, you can automatically apply the sensitive label and you can let them know. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you. Okay. So I'm here. And now let me go into my information protection. I'm within my information protection. Let me cancel out of this. I'm within my information protection solution. So information protection is where you can create sensitivity labels, publish them, manage them. And what I'd done is I'd created a confidential doc label already. And I can start to now edit it because I'd already published it as a manual label. But now I want to make it a little more powerful and add the condition for detecting a resume as well. So I may have had keywords, I may have had sensitive info types I've chosen, but I actually want to add an additional condition, and that's the power of it. So I'm going to go and do that. I'm going to go through encryption. Let's say I turned on encryption as well, but I'm going. One other thing, I do want to put a watermark on the resumes because I do want to make sure that automatically the watermark is applied so that it's Contoso proprietary and that's taken care of. So now when I come and I start to build my condition, use my condition builders to start creating the advanced conditions, I can actually now start to add, apart from sensitive info types, classifiers. And these kind of show you the same out-of-the-box classifiers, and the ones that you create now can be applied to a sensitivity label just like a retention label. So you see that coherence that we are starting to bring in and ensure that you can really both govern your data and protect the sensitivity around your data. And so what, in this case, I wanted to apply a resume, and that's what I've done here. So I'm going to go out of it. Now what I'm going to show you is how it kind of works within web apps with auto-labeling. So once I've published it, I go to the OneDrive. This is where my resumes, my legal team is starting to store their resumes, in HR collaborating on them because we've had an M&A. And so now I'm going to open a resume by Christopher Morgan. See how that works. And let's say I'm editing the resume here. OK. Give it a second. Typically, what I'll be doing is I will be working on it, and there you go. So as I'm working on it, I've also got a helpful tip that says your organization has applied the sensitivity label, confidential doc. In context, I could have also applied this as a recommended policy, so it could have suggested to the user, and then the user could have said yes or no. And that's pretty cool, because now what you're starting to see is the end users are also part of training the model, right? Because you want to provide the feedback back to the model starts to get better. Not just that the admin has trained it, but the end users have also. So that really, the end-to-end feedback loop is super important. So I'm going to come back now and show you the round of the demo by showing you that I've taken care of the risk as well, right? Because I do want to ensure that these resumes are correctly getting labeled now with the sensitivity label doc. So I can start to use these tools, Content Explorer, actually, even for continuous monitoring of the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the file path, because I know exactly which department I'd published it to. I'm going to also make sure that I add the sensitivity label just to ensure. I'm going to try this. I'm going to go to paralegal documents. All right. So now I start to see that the label's getting applied, and I can also select the confidential doc and start to see exactly where this confidential doc is starting to get applied. So really kind of starting to monitor back on the data. With that, I'm at the end of my demo. All right. OK. So let's recap what we saw. Oh. Clicker is not working. Can you see? Is it this one? All right, there you go. Takes a little bit of time. OK, so we're going to start to recap what we saw and what you saw today. So we've shown you multiple classification methods, the built-in classification types, the 90+ that are available out of the box. You can create your custom sensitive types, which we started off with. These were used for your initial scan to show you exactly where your data was. And they're organized. We'll get better and better. One of the capabilities that we want to bring and follow up with is templates, right? Where we can show you by industry, let's say by HIPAA or by privacy, group these sensitive types and show you where the data could be. So a lot of innovations that we can start to bring on top of this data. The next one that we spoke about was the trainable classifiers. They are built using AI and automation, and they are helpful for you to start to classify intellectual property and other types of data that is specific to your org. There are 6 ready-to-use classifiers that you can start to use across your sensitivity and retention labels. And then as you start and get comfortable creating your tenant-specific ones, they can be leveraged as well. And that's like integrated. Next, we spoke about the overview dashboard. This overview dashboard and Compliance Center being the home will start to bring you insights and analytics across your digital estate, across data that's distributed, across your cloud. We'll start to bring some of the on-prem data in as well, the scanner that's scanning that data. We want to bring that in as well, and all of the other data sets and insights over time. You can also start to use the Activity Explorer that we discussed to really monitor the file activity within your organization. So this is the 360 view of movement of file activity inside and outside your org. Super flexible to help you customize and create your own queries to derive insights. And we'll start to give you more insights and recommendations over time. So how do you get started? Define your sensitive data. And first thing is establish your label taxonomy, meaning we cannot stress hard enough our learning has been in talking to many customers. This takes time, this onboarding phase. So you can start to use some of these tools and capabilities to start those discussions with your business unit owners where this data is stored. Start to really think about your label classification scheme and the policies you want to put in place. Then you can start to customize, so really start thinking about scale, because the volume of data is growing, the complexity is growing. So do you want to put a strategy in place to identify more data sets and start to use the auto classification capabilities across information protection and governance to start to classify data. And then continuous monitoring is super key, because you want to make sure whether you're testing for false positives, you're testing for ensuring that you can monitor risk on an ongoing basis, whether it's for your sensitivity labels or retention labels. And that really helps you across the board with both those tools as well. So with that, thank you. And thank you for coming to the session. Hope you enjoyed it.